Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Yulissa Chambi wash processed Bolivia from H&S Coffee Roasters. And there's the bag right there. And H&S, based out of Laramie, Wyoming, and they're a coffee roaster that's appeared on this channel on several occasions, and a coffee roaster that recently won our July 2024 Coffee of the Month poll. And I was actually quite happy to see it win that poll, as it gave me an opportunity to add this coffee to that order, which was quite exciting for me, given that I very much enjoy reviewing Bolivian coffees. Couple that with the fact that we've had some pretty positive experiences with H&S recently, and the expectations for this coffee were pretty high, so it'll definitely be interesting to see how it turned out, as this right here is day 41. And we pushed the recipe a fair bit on this one at a 17:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 99 degrees Celsius, about 210 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this one best through the V60, which indicates a more medium fine grind roast profile for this coffee. So H&S does have this one listed as one of their lighter offerings. And we've actually found that this coffee's turned out a fair bit lighter than some of the coffees we've even had from Say recently. And in addition to that, it's still significantly lighter than the vast majority of American coffee roasters that we've had out there. Now, obviously, it's not quite as light as some of their ultralight offerings, but even then, it is still a pretty light coffee by most standards and metrics. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 14, first impression. And we did opt for the V60, and there was a slight bit less brightness and intensity to the cup than the notes would necessarily insinuate, rather offering a bit more of a traditional washed South American profile with a slightly more full cup and some sugary sweetness as well. The citric tones do feel most prominent outside of the traditional aspects, but other than that, it's been a pretty nice start. So we move on to day 17 as we opted for the Chemex, and this was a fair bit more in line with the early expectations that we had for this coffee, especially in terms of the brightness, as it's present much more in a tart sense, in line with both the listed blackberry as well as citric qualities to it. In addition to that, there is more sweetness as it's offering a sugary sense with plenty of body and texture once again. So a slight bit of a different experience on these first 2 days. Well, we move on to day 20 as we opted for the April brewer, and the cup does continue to trend much more along the lines of the expectations that we had for it, with much more tartness to the cup as it's continuing to skew on the brighter side of things with the citric aspects. At times, it's reminiscent of some lemon lime-like sodas with a nice herbality and sugariness as well. So this was a better experience as we moved on to day 23, opting for a V60 recipe that's closer to H&S's, which was that 99 Celsius, 210 Fahrenheit, the 17:1 water to coffee ratio. And we briefly mentioned that in one of our previous H&S reviews, that H&S being at a higher altitude, the boiling point is 198. So that's why we opted to go a little closer to the recipe. They usually opt for 18:1 on their coffees as well. So I felt much more comfortable kind of splitting the difference at that 17:1, but still going at the higher temperatures. And it definitely helped, as it was much more pronounced in terms of that Sprite-like feel to the cup. But also there's a very interesting candied dark honey feel to the cup as well, as it's a little unique in that regard with a lingering brightness. But this was a much more fun and enjoyable cup. So I said, this is actually a pretty good way to go with this one. Day 26 through the Chemex with the same adjustments, and the cup is still nice, but perhaps a little bit less depth as there's a heightened focus on the herbal citric qualities with more of the similarities to the Sprite. Nonetheless, it is still a pretty nice day. Day 29 through the V60 with the same adjustments, and it does continue to improve as there's a slight bit of a marshmallow-like sweetness to the cup, as well as some other sweeter attributes that are surprisingly sweet. Sprite does continue to feel like it's a note that's very much reminiscent of a lot of the experiences we're having within this coffee. And while we're on this day and on this note, I briefly wanted to say that it's kind of interesting just how many of H&S's coffees do have that marshmallow-like feel to them, as I can recall quite a few of them having that experience. So I do think that that might be just a little bit of a result of the roaster that they use. So that's kind of interesting in itself, given that I did not expect that within this coffee. Day 32 through the Chemex, and the cup does continue to perform well with more of the nice Sprite-like attributes. The cup has been pretty consistent across all brew methods, with the Chemex being a little bit more citric spiced, while the V60 has offered a little bit more sweetness. So on day 35, we opted for the V60 with that recipe one last time, and the cup does have great consistency as once again, the spiced Sprite-like attributes continue to remain the most prominent component within it in a sweeter sense, with an abundance of complementary tartness and plum fruit brightness as well. Straightforward, but I do have to say pretty well executed in that regard. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And we have quite a few level 4s, so let's start with the cleanliness level 4. I'm very happy with the cleanliness of this coffee, mostly because the definition within the profile of this coffee is quite well defined. A lot of the notes within this coffee are pretty straightforward, and given that I was extremely easily able to pick out so many of these notes, it's just a testament to how clean this coffee was. There really aren't a lot of things that can take away from the overall clarity of this coffee. Obviously, I reserved the level 5 for coffees that are just immensely clean, but this one is probably still on the cleaner side of that, so higher side of level 4, tremendous clarity within this coffee. Finish level 4, it definitely has a fair bit of the expected lasting kind of more citric qualities, that spiced quality, both of which are things that I've gone over and over through this one, but they're definitely lingering and present within this coffee, and I actually have no issue with that. It's kind of funny, I've mentioned in the past that I don't necessarily enjoy citric attributes within coffee. I don't necessarily enjoy spiced attributes, but when you present them in a very clean and unique manner as this coffee was presented, I actually end up really enjoying them, so I was very happy with that scoring there at that level 4. Sweetness level 4, truth be told, it could be even higher than that, maybe the higher side of level 4. I'm really surprised just how sweet this coffee is. On paper, looking at the notes of this coffee, truth be told, I didn't actually even look at the flavor notes, description, or profile of this coffee going into it. I just saw that we had a washed Bolivian coffee, and I was like, I really want to review that. I have such positive experiences with washed Bolivian coffees, and I did not expect it to have this level of sweetness when I actually took a very close look at what this coffee was supposed to be. But it was very sweet, and it was very sweet in that sugary sense once again, as I feel like that's a testament to the way that the coffees from H&S are presented in general. So very happy with that one there, scoring at that level 4 mark. Acidity level 4, that was fully expected going into it, though in the past I haven't necessarily had that experience with Bolivian coffees, but this one was, if anything, an exception to that rule, as this one on paper should have always had that level of brightness given the notes listed on here. All 3 of the notes that they have listed would insinuate plenty of brightness, and that definitely translated into the cup itself. Berry fruit level 4. So they did mention, I think, a blackberry note. Made a lot of sense. There's definitely a lot more of the tart berry feel within this one, and it is quite well defined and pronounced as well, so I'm very happy with that within this coffee as well. Citrus fruit level 4, I've been discussing that a lot throughout this coffee, as this one had that lemon lime Sprite-like feel to it, given that there's a complementary herbal tone to it that you're going to see within the rest of the notes on this one. So very happy with that being there at that level 4 mark. And then the floral and the spiced notes are both there at that level 3, and that's what I continue to go back to, and that's that Sprite-like feel to it, that soda-like feel to it, and I was very happy with both of them, giving this coffee just that unique characteristic to it. In certain ways, it can remind me slightly of some of Tim Wendelboe's coffees, but if anything, it just felt a little bit more sweet and pronounced in that regard. Body level 3, yeah, this one still had a fair bit of texture to it, especially with it being brewed through the V60. That's a full expectation that I had for this coffee, given what it is and the brewer that we opted for within it. So happy with that being there at that level 3 mark. And then we have a couple of level 2s, but honestly, outside of that, as I'm looking at this tasting wheel, I don't think there's anything else worth discussing. I do think it's a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee, I was very happy with it, especially given that I had some pretty high expectations for it going into it. Honestly, this coffee turned out exactly the way it's described, but if anything, it turned out better than the way it was described. Like, I had an impression of what this coffee should have been going into it, but it turned out much more unique while still at the same time being very much along the profile and description of this coffee that it was, which is all to say that this coffee just far exceeded the expectations, and that continues to be the results that I've had with H&S's coffees recently, with this one being no exception. This is one of my favorite Bolivian coffees that we've ever reviewed, and I do have to say that it has a slight chance at being in our top 10 coffees of the year list. Honestly, the only thing that it's in big contention with is all of the other wonderful coffees that we've had from H&S this year, as we can only limit our top 10 list to 2 coffees from the same coffee roaster. So it's just kind of competing against some really wonderful coffees that we've had from H&S. But as far as standard offerings go, this is one of my favorite standard offerings that we've had the entire year, as I just feel like this was very well executed and offered some tremendous sweetness and tremendous depth to it as well, with a very unique feel. all of the things that I'm looking for within a coffee: clarity, sweetness, not as much florality, but a very wonderful, unique profile to the fruit components within it as well. So fun in that regard, a lot of positive things to say about it. And that kind of takes us into the type of person I would suggest this coffee to. If you do enjoy that much more sugary soda-like feel to your coffees, then I feel like this one's a very good representation of that, especially given that it is still presented in a lighter profile while still offering wonderful clarity and immense sweetness. There's so many positives to take away from this one, so much depth within this one as well. It's kind of the best direction I can point somebody towards for this, and the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And this right here has been a review of the Yulissa Chambi wash processed Bolivia from H&S Coffee Roasters. Thank you for watching.